Hello and welcome to the Meditation Conversation. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and today I'm so excited to talk to Michelle Henderson. Michelle is an author, a psychic medium, certified spiritual advisor, educator, spirit artist, and speaker. She worked in education for 30 years, and after retiring, she became a certified spiritual advisor. She is passionate about helping intuitive children embrace their gifts. She also shares her innovative ideas with other light workers, giving them direction about supporting families of intuitive children. So welcome, Michelle. What a blessing to have you here today.
Well, I feel very blessed to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this topic of intuitive children and guiding the families of intuitive children. But before we get to that, I gave kind of a high-level quick overview of your background. Can you talk a little bit about your path and how your own abilities began to show themselves?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, everybody has a place and time where they have their spiritual awakening. But whenever I was younger, I grew up in the Dallas area. And as you know, it is a Bible Belt city, so very conservative. And anytime I was just really fascinated with the metaphysical or anything unusual, or, whenever I would watch something about psychic mediums. And my family, on the other hand, were not. So, it's one of those things that we were curious about, but we would not speak of. And I could feel the different energies in different environments. I knew whenever it was a really good energy and then kind of a lower energy, just kind of dragging you down. So I was aware of that. And I was aware of whenever I talked to friends, I had an intuitiveness. I knew what they were feeling.
And this was
Sometimes
as a child, right?
as a child, yes. So knew what they were feeling and what they were thinking. And then my 20s, I began to, I think Spirit was really trying to wake me up. They would visit me and I could really feel them, and I started hearing them.
And so who is them?
Oh, well, back then I'm not for sure.
Okay.
So these voices, what they would, I could hear them, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. So to me, I think it was a part of my spirit team when I think back, just trying to say, we are here for you if you're ready to be, use us to your ability or to be able to become a psychic medium. At that time, I was not ready. It scared me a little bit.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Was this like an audible thing that you could hear that sounded like it was outside of you? Was it inward?
At that time, and I'm really not for sure, I perceived it to be outside.
Okay.
Of my clairs. And then as I got older, then I became aware that it was inside. And so whenever I closed the door at that time, in my later 30s, early 40s, I started going to a psychic medium to help me, because I was going, I feel like I need to open up, and I just don't know how, because I was a little scared of it. And she educated me. And once she educated me, then the door just opened, and my spirit team, they were always there, but they never worked with me would work with me until I was ready. And they very patient. I'm sure they're going, come on, let's go.
Anytime now.
But I finally said yes. And then I had to learn how to control it. So I'd be watching a movie, and that's when you watch movies or TV, your subconscious gets out of the way. It's almost like driving, and spirit is able to talk to you more. So I had a grandmother come in one time, and she was so loud, and she said, I want you to tell my granddaughter this message. And I worked with her granddaughter, and I said, okay, I will, but you need to let me watch the movie. So I did. I relayed the message and everything, and her granddaughter could resonate with it. And so after that, I learned how to control it. To know when to bring in my spirit team and talk to me and work with me during work, and when to bring in those loved ones, and when not to.
Ah, now before you got that training with the medium that you talked about, and you were just hearing these voices, did that concern you?
Yes, just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, because it seemed like it was happening more and more. And so, we all have this thing, am I going crazy? Am I really
Mhm.
hearing this? And it really felt like I was not going crazy, that it was actually something spiritual happening.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, growing up with those scary movies, all the poltergeist, oh my goodness, in the 70s, they were really, really, really scary.
Yes.
So I think I programmed my brain to be scared when there's nothing to be afraid of.
Mhm.
So I really had to say, it's going to be okay. Um, they are here to help you help heal others.
Mhm.
And sure enough, once I let go of that fear is when I got stronger, and
Mhm.
I knew how to work with it more.
Mhm. I have one more question about the hearing, because are you
Yes.
primarily clairaudient then?
I am. Now I
Mhm.
use that. Plus I sometimes gets the pictures. It depends on what the loved one or what the spirit team wants to use at that time. But
Okay.
I did start with clairaudient.
Okay.
But sometimes I get the pictures, excuse me, and sometimes I just feel it.
Okay.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
have a lot of different clairs that are coming in.
Right.
Um, when you're hearing it, is there a differentiation between how it sounds in your head versus what you would consider your own thought?
Absolutely. Excuse me. Hold
Okay.
on. I am so sorry. I was doing
That's
this
okay.
this morning
I
and
can
I
edit
thought
it.
it's allergies.
Uh-huh.
So hold on. I'm sorry. Okay, yes. So I can distinguish between the two. So whenever I'm talking to a loved one that comes in from spirit,
Mhm.
it's like a conversation that we go back and forth. And whenever I ask a question, before I finish the question, an answer comes through. And it resonates. And how I know it's not really me talking is because it resonates with the person that I'm talking to, the sitter. So they'll
Yeah.
go, oh, I know exactly who you're talking to. So now, if it's spirit that intuitive, like when you're driving
Mhm.
and you start going right, and somebody tells you stop before you have an accident, that that's coming from the spirit world,
Mm.
because it's something that kind of wakes you up. Now, I still have the thinking in my head on my own,
Mhm.
whenever I think things through, and I can definitely tell the difference,
Okay. It's
even in the
so
beginning.
okay. It's so interesting because it's so different for different individuals. Like I am not clairaudient.
Mhm.
Um, but it's interesting. I'm like, when it comes to intuition, I am oftentimes it's hard for me to distinguish between my own thought and guidance that is from my team,
Right.
or and I don't, I'm not a medium or anything, so I feel that the messages that I get are more from my team. But it is not like I just had a conversation with a friend of mine a couple of days ago, and I was like, man, I really just felt like I had to reach out, and she was going through a hard time, and I didn't know that until I talked to her. And I was like, I feel like, somebody that was really close to her who had passed away. I was like, maybe that, maybe I was getting some sort of a nudge from her. And I said, but it's not like, she appeared at the bottom of my bed and was like, call my mom or whatever. I was like, it just was like, you just kept coming to mind. That doesn't mean that it wasn't somebody on her side who was, prompting that. But for me, it didn't come through. It doesn't typically come through as something that I can differentiate from my own thoughts, if that makes sense.
Now, were you afraid of it when it came through?
No, because it really felt like me.
Yes.
You know what I
Yes.
mean?
And that's what I was going to say. Sometimes your higher self will actually help as well. I mean, you have your
Mm-hmm.
spirit team, which to me, they're a part of you as well.
Mm-hmm.
But your higher self, too, sometimes can take over
Yeah.
and bridge that gap.
Yeah. And then it
So,
just feels like you can't differentiate, I guess.
right. And sometimes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still a part of you whenever you connect in with spirit world.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so regardless you're still tapping in, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really, to me, it doesn't matter where the source who is giving it to you,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you receive it,
Right.
which is important.
Right. And that I'm glad that you highlighted that, because that's my point as well, is that even if you're not hearing something that you recognize as external or not you, it doesn't mean that it's not from a higher power.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I thought it interesting when you talked about whenever I didn't see someone at the end of my bed. As you get older, I've talked to psychic mediums that does not occur as much as it did when they were younger. So I
Oh,
think
it's
when
like a
you're younger,
trigger.
you're able to pull all that out.
Or maybe
And
you need it more. It's part of
well,
your
that's true.
training.
That's true too. That's a
Yeah.
good point. That is very
Yeah.
true.
And then as you begin to trust yourself and you recognize the energies, you don't need that verification, because I would imagine that's takes more energy on their side too. If they can get to you an easier way, why not?
Absolutely. And yet every time I start a reading, I know that they are there, but the more that you tap in and everything, it's not as strong in the beginning because
Mhm.
as you go, because you know that they're there and they don't
Mhm.
have to use that energy to present that. So
Mhm.
as you're connecting in, then you're connecting in, then you really start talking to them and they go, oh, they're there. But in the very
Yeah.
beginning, I kind of get scared and think, well, what if they don't? I mean, I still do that. You're very
Really?
vulnerable, but
Yeah.
it always works out. I'm always able to connect in.
Yeah, it's that present moment, it sounds like, is so. I was tapping into that this morning of just not from a spiritual medium perspective, but just that, like, how important the present moment is and the trust that it will fall in when it's time. And this is happening more and more with me too, where I just have to trust that, like, even if I'm like, the information that's coming today may be relevant to something that I just read like moments ago, and to trust that alignment rather than having to pull on my intellectual understanding of all the teachings that I'm familiar with, and all of the, whatever, where it's, this whole intellectual exercise. It's like, wow, when you really are just in the present moment, it's like, what is coming right now?
Mm-hmm.
And that trust that it all falls in when
And I
it's.
and I think that's exactly what. Yes. So whenever you start questioning it, or your ego gets in the way, and you're going, is that really happening? That's when the connection is broken a lot of times. Is because you're not, you're going, okay, I'm getting scared, and that emotion gets in the way.
Mm-hmm.
That what really helped me to get my ego out of the way is a lot of art activities, yoga, and meditation. And yoga, and I was doing this during my spiritual awakening, really helped me focus, because when you're doing yoga, you do that mantra and then you always think in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I could really feel the energy around me whenever during a yoga session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
But yes,
beautiful.
that ego gets in the way.
Yeah, so many great tools. And like you say, the creative outlets are amazing too. So I know we didn't really talk about this, but I read that you have worked a lot when you were in education. You worked a lot with children with autism,
Yes,
special needs children. And I'm
right.
interested that you worked so much with children with autism, and now your focus is on helping parents of children with psychic gifts. And I
Yes.
wondered if there's bleed over between those two groups, if there's if children with autism tend to be more likely tuned into their extra senses, or not. I don't know.
Oh, and those are Wonderful, wonderful questions. But yes, so working with autism children, that became my specialty. And I did parent training for children with autism, for families. So that, yes, so that really helped me gear what I am doing now to help families with psychic children and know what to do with that and how to really nurture that growth that they have in there instead of being afraid of it. But yeah, so working with autism children and doing the research, I was fascinated. I was going, oh my gosh, I was in that situation. So yes, a lot of the children who have been diagnosed with autism, especially when they're nonverbal, they can telepathically talk to you. And I feel like whenever I was in a session with a little one, 2-year-old, I can still remember, he had blonde hair. And it's like we connected and I knew exactly what he was needing. And when I say telepathically, I'm not saying with words necessarily, but our energies really combined. And it was almost like we could understand each other. And there is a medium who an adult medium who has been diagnosed with Asperger's, who practices as a medium. And William Stillman is his name. So, and that to me, I'm going, oh my gosh, I think that's perfect. So, but yes, so a lot of these children, I think, can tune in and see things that we cannot see, because a lot of times they'll look off in the distance and they'll laugh, and I'm going, what are you laughing at? So yes, I think they can connect, even though they can't really tell you. Now, there is some children, I've talked to several parents who they say that their children can tell them who they've had contact with and who they've been talking to. So yes, so their energy is totally different than, neurotypical, is what we say, neurotypical people who have not been diagnosed.
Yeah.
I just think, when you look at the earth too, we have energy grids, and you can see, or a lot of people can feel them. Some people can see them. And to me, I believe these children can actually see the different types of energy and maybe into different realms. And I actually have come up with a different name for them.
Really?
I love to call them kaleidoscope children, because they're able to see the different patterns. Because, when you look through the kaleidoscope, you can see the different patterns, so geometric patterns. And I think that's a lot of times what they're seeing, are the different colors and the different energies. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. And it is fascinating. I read a book a couple months ago. I think it was called Lyrica's Ascension Journey. And she's a woman in the Sedona area right now, but she's an adult person, a non-speaking person with autism. And her mom wrote the book, but they have used like pyramid technology and things like that so that they can connect in higher dimensions. And her mom talks about the multidimensional work that Lyrica does. And it is really fascinating. I actually had them on the podcast, and we had a lot of technology issues.
Oh no! Oh, of course.
Yeah, and so I didn't release it because it was really choppy, and so we'll connect next week. And
I would love to hear that.
Fascinating! It's so fascinating.
And being in Arizona, of all places.
Yes.
All that energy. So that is really fast. And to me, I think these kids are getting stronger and stronger with each generation.
I agree. There's a lot coming in. There's a lot of difference in these younger generations, and they just seem to not buy into the mainstream so easily, and it makes me hopeful about what they're carrying in and what that means for the future.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, they tend to be what we call sensitive children. They're very empathic, and they can feel the different energies and everything. And so I think they definitely come with love. And even though they may be exposed to the mainstream, they may be exposed to life, I think they're strong enough to continue on that journey. And I think to me, honestly, I think they can teach their parents on how to, really grasp and just embrace their spirituality. And I
Mhm.
say spirituality because I think it's really important for them to realize that there is something that's higher power
Mhm.
that is, helping them on their journey. And this could be their higher self, whoever they think, as a higher being. Everybody thinks of it differently, and
Mhm.
spiritually, because everybody's on a different journey. But I think when the parents are aware of their children being spiritual or their gifts, then I think they're going to wake up and say, you know what? I might have the same gifts because
Mhm.
this is my child. And that is
Yeah.
so true.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I love that. So in working with intuitive children, of course, I'm sure they're not all, children with autism, that
Oh,
just
right.
wasn't
No, no, absolutely. Yeah.
right. So
Right.
what are the most common signs that you see of intuitive children?
Okay. So, oh my goodness, and I'll just tell you a few. There's so many, and it
Mhm.
depends on the child. But the number one thing is that they're very empath. They are an empath. They can feel different feelings, they can feel the different emotions, and which makes them sensitive. They cry constantly.
Mm.
They come home from school, they're exhausted, they need to be alone. And then many, many times, especially the younger children, they are able to see a grandmother, a grandparent, anyone who has passed on, or they have an imaginary friend, as what we say, that they talk to and they play with. And I think that's what really scares parents a lot of times. And they think, well, is this a real imaginary friend from spirit, or is it just their imagination?
Mhm.
And to me, I think, having an imaginary friend is so soothing, is so comfortable. Does it really matter? That kind of thing. If it's somebody from spirit who is playing with the child, I think it's awesome.
Mhm.
Invite this loving spirit in to help your child. And I think there's just, again, I think it's a fear factor.
Mhm.
And then some of these children can see different colors around people, which of course is the auras. And they
Mhm.
may or may not understand what that is. So again, I think we need to educate our kiddos,
Mhm.
in creative ways. Because I know teaching yoga to children and meditation, completely different techniques as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
So, right.
What is there a specific age where these gifts start to come online or where they start to dissolve? Either way?
Oh, and that's a very good question. So, um, of course, when they're born, we're all born with it. We accept it because we don't know any different.
Mhm.
And I think 2-year-olds are able to state, "Hey, I see somebody over there," or they
Mhm.
look at somebody and start talking or start playing with them. So it can start really, really young. And
Mhm.
then I believe once they become teenagers, and I've seen this, then they start because of peer pressure or they want to be social, they want to be accepted. That's when it starts dropping.
Mhm.
And I think life gets in the way and then they get busy and so forth, and hopefully they're using it on a daily basis because you can use your intuitiveness as you're working. I know
Mhm.
I did. And then whenever it was time, I knew it was time to use my gifts. And so
Mhm.
they may be going through the same thing, but they also need to accept their authentic self.
Right.
But yeah, so as they get older, I think they become more aware of the social norm
Mm.
and what is accepted and what's not. But I do think things are beginning to change. I think it's beginning to be accepted more and more. And I think more kids are looking at it as, oh, that is really cool.
Yeah.
But again, as a teenager, they really need to be educated because sometimes if they're trying to find themselves, they may begin to look at, and I don't want to call it a dark side, it's just a lower form of energy. So they may dive into more of things that may injure themselves, a different cult, type of cult. So that's why it's really important to keep them in the love and the light. But again,
Yeah.
everybody's on a different journey.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Well, and you talked a little bit about parental fear, but I know that you work a lot with families. Like that's a
Yes.
big part of it is helping the parents to accept and understand what's happening. Um, but why do you think that parents might tend to avoid recognizing and encouraging that the development of these abilities?
Right. So, and each family is different. And so, whenever I first start working with families, I always ask them, what religion sector are you a part of?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times that will be the number one thing. They've been programmed, they've been taught, to be afraid of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not, and I don't judge. I just go in and try to help them the best that I can.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's the fear of the unknown. I mean, they can see their child being happy, or if their child is a little bit afraid of it, and they don't know how to comfort their children. So, it's all. So I try to educate them and give them exercises that they can do with their child. And the number one thing I teach them is you are in control.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you don't have to have it control you. You are in control.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as they feel like they are in control and can manage whatever is going on in their house, I think that really helps them. And then I try to teach them it's okay where your child is. And so I try to teach them exercises that they can do with their child, and
Mm-hmm.
they can bond together in that area.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, you touched on this a few minutes ago, but that you feel like the tide is changing a little bit, and some of that like reluctance that children may feel as these gifts start to become recognized within them, that there might be a shift. Um, and this was one of my questions, like, do you feel like there is more familial, like more family acceptance of children like this than there was like 30 years ago? I'm not sure how far back it goes that you have been on working with children in particular on
Right,
this path, but
right.
I know that there's work by like Dr. Ian Stevenson, for example, where he's worked on children's past life memories,
Oh, yeah.
and he's been doing that since I want to say the 60s or 70s, and he passed away years ago. But a lot of his work was in the East because it was so much more accepted there that
Right.
these stories could develop. He had a handful, or he had so many cases. His work is really fascinating. He's got a huge library. He worked at the University of Virginia, but the cases were so much fewer here in the West.
Oh, right.
And it seemed to be because like it just was shut off for, it
Oh,
was like
absolutely.
not an option,
Right.
like we're not
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
investigate this because it's ridiculous.
Right, right. And I think, yes, and I think it's people tend to move very slow with change. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's kind of what is it? A paragram. I'm trying to think of the word for it.
Paradox or
Yes, there you go. Yeah, it's kind of, it takes time to change with new
oh, a
ideas. A
paradigm.
paradigm. Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
shift. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just went blank there for a second. But
Yeah.
I think in the 60s, and I think we're beginning to see a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 60s, I think that there was a spiritual awakening there
Mm-hmm.
because of all the wars that were going on and all the, oh my gosh, the chaos in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're beginning to go back to that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think after COVID, I think people are beginning to wake up and they're saying, you know what? Life is so short. I need to find spirituality somewhere. I
Mm-hmm.
need to know that there's hope. I need to know that there's faith.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that people are beginning to realize that I don't want to say COVID happened for a reason, but it's almost like come on, you've got to wake up. We need to kind of shift things
Mm-hmm.
along. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think people are beginning to wake up to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that has something to do with it. It seems like there is definitely, a shift societally, and it seems to be rapid at the moment, like very accelerated.
Right, right. And I think too, a lot of people are beginning to leave the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one reason why I think they're looking for something.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just, and they're just, and I think that's, again, I think that's why people's minds are beginning to open up,
Mm-hmm.
and they're beginning to open the door a little bit,
Yeah.
I guess you could say,
Mm-hmm.
to
Interesting.
have that connection with the
Yeah,
divine.
more applied,
Yes,
experiential rather than dogmatic.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I had a
Absolutely.
guest on recently, Catherine Lanigan, and she talked about a near-death experience of her dad. And he was a very devout Catholic. He was a professional, like kind of, followed things to the letter, and then had this near-death experience. And he just started using totally different language. He was talking about
All right.
beings of light,
Oh, wow.
and that he, was on the other side. He didn't talk about heaven. It was like the other side. So like the vocabulary he was using was different. And there was like, even though it wasn't in parallel with the doctrine and the
Mm.
dogma of the church, he had absolutely no doubt because he'd experienced it,
Oh, absolutely.
you
I think
know?
that, oh, I love that story. I
Mm,
love how
really
people after
powerful.
death experiences come back and
Mm,
say, it's not as complicated as we're making it.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah. But I still go to church, and people, through social media, a lot of my friends are from the church, are finding out. And I actually had a couple go, oh, how cool. Can I come for a reading?
oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, that's another way, reason why I think people are beginning to open up more and more.
Right. That's
And
great.
I was actually with a child yesterday in a school system, and she, I think it's, spirit to spirit talking. I
Mm.
think the children know, oh, I can tell her this. And so all of a sudden she just starts talking about her sister who has passed away,
Oh.
and never met her, but you could tell that, and I could feel the sister's energy as well being around her.
Mhm.
And I looked at her and said, I guess your sister will always be your sister. And that's exactly what she needed to hear. And she said, yep, she will be, that. And
Oh,
so I thought, oh, so,
yeah.
I think whatever resonates within us
Mhm.
pulls people to us that really need to talk, or we have something to give for their healing.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, let's talk about your recent book. Can you
Yes.
can you tell us about it?
Oh, absolutely. So, and it's very interesting how, again, spirit and the divine works,
Mhm.
because it was one of these things I needed to do. And this was last March, and I knew exactly what needed to be in the book. I had all the experiences that I had in education. I just felt like, hey, this is going to pull it all together. This is the reason why I worked all of these years in education. There's always a reason why you do something, you
Yeah.
experience something. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so this book, it is called Spiritual Nurturing for Intuitive Children. And what it is, it's a guidebook, is what I like to call it,
Mhm.
because it guides people. Parents can read it as well, but it's for light workers, it's for coaches, spiritual coaches, or teachers, whoever are working with children who experience intuitive um, experiences, or paranormal experiences. It gives them the tools to go into a family's home and do some type of family training in that area.
Mm.
So in the very beginning, it says, okay, you need to first do an intake session. And what an intake session is, just getting information on what's going on with the family and with the child.
Mhm.
And then it has exercises that you can actually use to be able to teach these families what it means to be an intuitive and how to
Mhm.
deal with this, okay? And the spirituality of it and all. And then at the end of the book, it has case studies. Well, if you had this child, and this child is experiencing this and this and this, and the family is giving you this information, what would you plan for this family? So again, it's more of a tool for us to use. And of
Mm.
course, the fear factor should be thrown out. because
Mm-hmm.
and another way that I researched is I talked to several psychic mediums who what they experienced when they were children.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, I didn't have the support. My family told me to shut up, no more, close
Mm-hmm.
that door. And they said, if I had somebody that could push me along and embrace what I had, I would be further along than I am today.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, that's so, it's such a universal foundational truth, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
you can think of
Absolutely.
anything where you've got like a musician, who has a
Oh my
skill
goodness.
in there, or an artist is probably a better analogy, or maybe both, but somebody who really wants to be an artist and it's not practical, the parents don't want to nurture that because they want them to have something, steady to fall into as a career. And so it's not
That's a,
nurtured,
that's a great way to put it.
so
I
important to
mean, that
kind
is a
of,
great comparison.
yeah,
Yes.
if we meet our children where they are, and it can be hard because as parents, we want to set them up
Right.
for the highest success, however we view success. And, in the case of, that can be one of those interesting things with how quickly times are changing, where it's like, okay, well, as a parent, we may have experience where, there was somebody who was considered a weirdo who was always talking to their, you know, invisible friend in
Yeah, right.
fifth grade or something. And so it's like, well, I don't want you to go through what I saw that person go, or what they went through. I turned that
Yes.
off because that was uncomfortable. That was traumatic, or, whatever. But without recognizing where that their child is growing up in a different environment societally,
Mm-hmm.
that may also be nurturing that in a different way where it's cool. Hey, how much are the Marvel movies helping us with this? I don't know, but
Oh,
we've
yeah.
got a lot of like superhero movies where this stuff is awesome. These
Right.
these kinds of gifts are amazing. So is that like helping children to where they don't feel so alien, if they're experiencing the supernatural? I don't
Yes.
know.
Yes. And that's great. I'm one that loves all the Marvel movies. And you're
Yeah.
right. Each one has a different ability.
Mhm.
And they do talk, especially in the X-Men, there are certain families that want them to turn it off,
Mm.
instead of going to that fabulous school
Mhm.
of the X-Men. And
Yeah.
so, but yeah, so that is actually talked about, where the
Yeah.
family is saying, no, we don't want, because we don't want you to be used. And that's
Mhm.
another thing, because I recently read a fictional book by Stephen King, where this little boy did have the psychic ability, mediumship abilities, that could talk to someone, after who has passed away.
Mhm.
And he was being used by the police officers or detectives that were around him. And they
Oh.
said, and they would, almost kidnap him to the fact and say, we want you to do this. And
Oh.
so we do need to protect our children because they can also be used in
Mhm.
society.
In society, and then also, not all beings that are on the other side are benevolent too. So I don't
Yes.
know, is there anything any coaching that you do in that regard as far as like protection, or how to discern, light and what's maybe not as benevolent?
Right. Well, yes. So I do teach them the intention.
Mhm.
What you put out there is important.
Mhm.
So if you intend to work with love and light, that's who you will work with.
Mhm.
If you want to work with a heavier force, a darker force, that's who you will work with.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I always tell them it's all in the intention. There are some clearing techniques that you can use,
Mhm.
and I actually clear my office. I use sage.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the smell. I love it. It opens me up. It clears the energy. It's not because I'm afraid of, dark energies coming in or being right there. I clear it because it just so much, it's almost like cleaning your house, of
Mm-hmm.
dust. You're clearing it of energy, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many different ways that you can clear a home.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all in the intention, if you want to think of it, because you're not going to constantly stay in your home. You
Mm-hmm.
may go out in public, and and a spirit may come home with you because they
Mm-hmm.
like you, they like your energy.
Mm-hmm.
So but if you practice intention and you pray about it, you will definitely stay in that love and light.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I am really not afraid of the darker energies because I don't have the intention for that.
Right. And that fear, the lack of fear is so important as
Yeah.
well. You
Yes.
get in that fear and then you are attracted.
Yeah.
You're at a lower
Yeah.
frequency. So it's like
Yes.
you make it easier for that. So that's so important to just be
Yes.
aware and diligent, pray, like you say, be connected to source, and also trust and,
Yes.
be intentional. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
if you had to highlight one takeaway from your book, what would that be?
Oh my goodness. Just exactly what we've been talking about
Mhm.
is to embrace your uniqueness. Do
Mhm.
not be afraid of anything spiritual. And really, spiritual is number one to have in
Mhm.
your life.
Mhm. That's
Yes.
beautiful. How can people find out more about you and your work?
Okay, well, they can go on my webpage. So it's www.michellehendersonmedium.com. And I also have a Facebook page, but my webpage really explains everything.
Okay, and you do sessions because we've talked a lot about children, but it
Yes,
sounds like you also do private sessions with
I do.
everybody.
Yes, I do. So I do mediumship and I do psychic readings, and I
Mhm.
can also do both.
Mhm.
And I'm also training light workers, or like I said, educators, whoever want to be a part of these families. So
Mhm.
I'm training them. And if they want to be a part of the training, they need to go to the website and become a member of the website.
Mhm.
And we meet one time a month on Zoom. And that way we can brainstorm about who they're working with, and if they have any questions or they want to teach others, hey, this really worked with this child
Mhm.
and this
That's great.
family. So yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Good. Well, is there anything else that you want to share as we wrap up here, Michelle?
I don't believe so. Just
Okay.
again, just know that especially after COVID, there is hope at the end of the tunnel,
Mhm.
and just to embrace who you are.
Perfect.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing. This is really important. I can imagine that this is, so eye-opening and supportive for so many families and children and people who are grieving and so on. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Well, I appreciate it so much. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, I have stopped the audio.